I was standing in my kitchen this morning, drinking coffee, when I glanced over at my toaster. Perfectly good toaster. Works fine. And instantly my brain went, you know what you really need? That 4-slice, chrome-plated, Wi-Fi-enabled toaster you saw online. Because why toast bread manually when you can do it from an app, right? Then I opened my banking app, looked at my tiny counter, and realized
And there's no money in here!
And that dumb toaster dilemma is actually the fundamental problem of entire human species. You've just hit the starting line of economics. You are a human, so your desires are basically infinite. You want food, shelter, status, yes, the slightly larger Wi-Fi toaster. But the world is stingy. The world is incredibly stingy. Economists call this scarcity. We have infinite wants but finite resources. There just isn't enough stuff, time, or land for everyone to have everything. That collision between I want everything and there isn't enough is why economics exists at all. So today we are going to deep dive into the operating system of the world. Textbook definition tends to hide the drama. Think about it this way. If you live in a world with literally infinite pizza, economics wouldn't exist. You wouldn't need to trade for pizza. You wouldn't need a job to earn pizza money. And prices wouldn't exist because you don't pay for something that's as abundant as air. But here on Earth, pizza is very much not infinite. So we have to make choices. At its core, economics is the study of how people make choices when they can't have it all. It's the study of how we deal with scarcity. Once we realized we couldn't make iPhones for ourselves, we figured out one crucial thing. We should not try to do everything ourselves. If I try to grow my own wheat, raise my own cows, and build my own house, I'm going to have a very miserable, probably very short life. I would be living in a hut, eating grass. So instead, we trade. Trade is the engine of civilization. Imagine I have 10 apples and you have 5 bananas. I'm sick of apples, you're sick of bananas. We swap. Before the trade, we each had a bunch of stuff we didn't really want. After the trade, the total amount of fruit in the world hasn't changed. Still 10 apples, 5 bananas. But the value has gone up because value is subjective. I'm happier, you're happier. We literally created wealth just by moving stuff around. That's a positive sum game. Unless you're allergic to banana, in which case it's a win-win with an EpiPen. But trade introduces a concept that hurts a little if you think about it too long. Opportunity cost. That is the idea that ruins free things for everyone, because nothing is ever free. Even if you don't spend a cent, you still pay with your time and attention. Opportunity cost is the value of the next best alternative you gave up to do what you're doing. Right now, you're listening to this. Thank you. But the cost is everything else you're not doing. You're not sleeping. You're not working. Not watching a cat fail videos on YouTube. And cat fails are high-value content. That's the price you pay. You kill the cat videos to birth this economics lessons. Every choice is a sacrifice. That makes every decision feel like a bit heavier, and it should. Opportunity cost explains why we just don't do everything. But it gets even more interesting when we ask, who should do what? Intuitively, we assume the best person for the job should always do the job. If you're best at basketball, you play in the NBA. If you're best at brain surgery, you should operate on brains. But if you're not best at everything, enters the Superman problem. Alice is a brilliant brain surgeon, saving lives every day. But she's also annoyingly the world's fastest typist. She can blast data into spreadsheet faster than anyone on Earth. So should Alice do her own data entry since she's better than her assistant? It feels wrong because if she's typing, she's not doing surgery. This is comparative advantage. Even Alice is better at typing. The opportunity cost of her typing is insane. Every hour she spends on spreadsheet is a potential life loss in the OR. Her assistant, let's call him Bob, is slow at typing, but he's absolutely terrible at brain surgery. Bob's opportunity cost for typing is low. If Bob isn't typing, he's just not accidentally killing people in surgery. So Bob has a comparative advantage in typing, not because he's good, but because he's the least bad option once you factor in what else each person could be doing. I find that kind of uplifting. It says that even if you are terrible at almost everything, as long as you're proportionally less terrible at one thing than the another, you're economically useful. It's the economic argument for self-esteem. You don't have to be the best. You just have to specialize where your opportunity cost is lowest. And that's why nations trade. That's why you don't make your own shoes. So scarcity pushes us. Opportunity costs guide us. Comparative advantage tells us what to specialize in. If you throw all those people and decision into a box and shake it, what do you get? You get a market. When you hear market, you might picture people in suits screaming at screens on Wall Street. And sure, that is a market. But a market is just a place where physical or digital, where buyers and sellers meet to exchange value. It's farmer's market, it's a lemonade stand, it's your cousin selling Fortnite skin to a kid in Brazil through PayPal. If value moves, it's a market. So what controls all of this? Nobody is in overall charge. There's no minister of toaster deciding how many toasters the country needs this year. And that's the miracle. That's the decentralized. The thing that powers it. The thing that powers it is incentives. People respond to incentives always. Back to pizza. If a slice costs $100, what's your incentive? Your incentive is to starve or, more realistically, eat a taco. You're not buying that slice. High prices discourages buyers. But what about the pizza shop owners? If pizza is selling for $100 a slice, they are waking up at 4 a.m. to making dough and converting the garage into an oven. They want to sell as much as possible. High prices encourages sellers. High prices encourages sellers. So you get this tug of war. Buyer wants it cheap, seller wants it expensive, and eventually they meet somewhere in the middle. That somewhere is equilibrium, the magical price where the amount people want to buy exactly matches the amount people want to sell. If it happens with no giant meetings, no government memos, it happens through what Adam Smith called the invisible hand math, desire, and the desperation quietly works in the background. The invisible hand doesn't care about you. It doesn't care if you're hungry or if you stub your toe. It just matches supply with demand. It's cold, but remarkably efficient, which is why there's bread on the shelves when you show up at the store. But there is a big friction point. Our apple for banana trades works if we both want what the other has. What if I have apples and you don't want apples? You want a goat and I don't have a goat. This is the double coincidence of wants problem. Barter collapses because it wastes all its energy hunting for that perfect match. Has someone who has what you want and wants what you have. So we invented a lubricant. We call it money. Money is the economic lube. It lets us trade with strangers. You accept my money for apples, not because you love bit of paper or glowing number in your banking app, but because you trust someone else will accept that same money later for the goat. Money is really just crystallizes trust. It's a medium of exchange, a unit of account so we can measure value, and a store of value so we can save. But because it's built on trust, it's fragile. If that trust breaks, the whole system shakes. That monster under the bed has a name: inflation. Inflation is what happens when money loses value, usually because there's too much money chasing the same amount of stuff. One infamous example is Zimbabwe in late 2000s. The government printed money to pay its bill, but it massively overdid it. By 2008, the estimated annual inflation rate hit 89.76 trillion%. That's an 89.7 followed by 20 zeros. Prices were doubling roughly every day. People walked around with $100 trillion notes that couldn't buy a bus ticket. And some literally used the paper as toilet tissue because it was cheaper than actual toilet paper. That's what happened when monetary trust evaporates. So who guards that trust? Who makes sure today's dollar don't turn into tomorrow's confetti? Central banks. In central banks, in the US, that's Federal Reserve. In Europe, the European Central Bank. Think of them as the plumber of the money system, or the parent who take away the punch bowl at the party. Their main job is to manage the money supply, and their main tool is interest rate. You hear this in the news constantly. The Fed raises rate, the Fed cuts rate. Why should you care? Because interest rate are price of the borrowing money. Think of that like thermostat for the economy. If the economy is running hot and inflation is high, the central bank turns up rate. Borrowing for a mortgage or a business expansion becomes expensive. People spend less, businesses slow down, things cools off. If the economy is freezing, like in a recession, they turn rates down. Cheaper loan encourages people to buy houses, start companies, and start hiring workers. And if that still doesn't work, they reach out for the big guns, quantitative easing, basically creating new money electronically and injecting it into the financial system to keep the credit flowing. So now we have the machine, the market, the fuel, the incentive, the lube, the money, and the plumber, the central banks. How do we keep score? How do we know if we are winning? That's where the GDP comes in, gross domestic product. GDP is the total value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a year. Final means we only count the finished stuff, not every step along the way. We don't count the wheat and then the flour and then the bread. Or we would be triple counting the same wheat. We just count the loaf the consumers buy. The classic GDP formula is C plus I plus G plus brackets X minus M. So C is consumption, what households buy, plus investments, businesses spend on equipment and building, plus government spending, roads, schools, and tanks, plus net export, what we sell to the world minus what we buy from it. But GDP is a microwave with no doors. It heats your food, but it might give you radiation poisoning. It measures activity, not quality. A hurricane that destroys a city can boost GDP because rebuilding costs money and counts as economic activity. Even though nobody is better off, selling cigarettes to teenagers raises GDP while lowering health. GDP doesn't care about your lungs, the environment, or unpaid work like raising kids. It just counts transaction. So if you have a country with a huge GDP and a miserable population, it's the best crude scoreboard we have, but it's very incomplete. Now let's talk about G in that formula, government spending. To spend money, government needs to get money. That's taxes, the subscription fee for civilization. Nobody loves paying them, but everyone loves road, hospitals, and fire departments. In practice, modern government almost always spend more than they collect. That gap is deficit. To fill it, they borrow by issuing bonds, which creates national debt. The US, for example, has accumulated tens of trillions of dollars of public debt. Is that automatically a disaster? Not necessarily. Debt is like a credit card. It depends on what you use it for. If you borrow to invest in infrastructure, education, technology that boosts future growth, that can be good debt. But if you borrow for political, convenient, but economically useless stuff, eventually the bill shows up. If you cannot pay or roll over that debt, you are in Argentina territory. Serial defaults, collapsing currency, and a reputation that makes future borrowing painful. So far, everything sounds neat and logical. Scarcity, trade, market, central bank, GDP, debt. But the real world is messier. In a textbook diagram, supply meets demand smoothly. In real life, I just want avocado toast. And getting that toast on my plate is a logistical miracle. Think about that avocado. It might be grown in Mexico or Peru, using fertilizers from somewhere like Russia, packed in a crate made in China, loaded on a truck, then shipped, then another truck. Currency exchange, trade laws, refrigeration tech, logistic software, all of that just so you can pay $14 for brunch. The global supply chain is like a giant Rube Goldberg machine designed to deliver breakfast. And it's fragile. When the Evergreen cargo ship stuck sideways in the Suez Canal in 2021, roughly 12% of global trade was disrupted, and about $10 billion of goods per day were suddenly delayed. One ship, one mistake, global chaos. We have optimized supply chain for just-in-time efficiency, but sacrifice resilience. One hiccup and the whole system rattles. And it's not just the boat or ports messing things up, it's us. Traditional economics pretends we are perfectly rational calculators, Homo economicus, making careful cost-benefit analysis for every coffee and roasters. Behavioral economics says absolutely not. Humans are a chaos merchant. We are full of bugs. Hyperbolic discounting means we massively overvalue the present compared with the future. One donut now versus two donuts next week, most of us grab the donut now. That's why saving for retirement is hard. Loss aversions means losing $20 hurts about twice as much as finding $20 feels good. So we cling to bad investments or avoid smart risk. And the sunk cost fallacy makes us say, I already watched 3 seasons of this awful show. I have to finish it. We have already spent $1 billion on this failing project. We can't stop now. We throw good money after bad constantly. So the economy is this giant machine run by irrational monkeys. That's why government and companies sometimes try to nudge us, automatically enrolled in retirement plans, default settings that pushes healthier behavior, reminders and friction that slow bad decision. They are gently steering our buggy brains in a better direction. Now zoom out. Why are some countries rich while others stay poor? Is it just about natural resources? You might think so, but the pattern says otherwise. Japan has relatively few natural resources, but it is very rich. Russia has massive natural resources, yet struggle with stagnation and volatility. It's not just what's in the ground. Development economics points to institutions, property rights, rules of law, functioning courts, and political stability. Good institutions let build businesses, and trust contracts will be honored. Bad ones traps people in survival mode. That's the poverty trap. If you're poor, every cent goes to food or basic needs. You can't save, which means you can't invest in education or tools. Without those, your productivity doesn't rise, so you stay poor. Climbing out of that loop is brutally hard. So where does that leave our grand argument about systems, capitalism, socialism, and everything in between? In reality, every country on earth runs on mixed economy. The US has public schools, roads, social security, all clearly socialized elements, alongside Apple, Google, and a stock market full of private companies. China has a nominally communist government, but aggressively capital market in many sectors. Everyone is trying to mix ingredients to get the best of both. Capitalism is fantastic at innovation and efficiency. It gave us the iPhone and a million flavors of toasters. But it tends to produce inequality and can leave vulnerable people behind. Socialism focuses more on fairness and basic security, but if you push it too far, you can kill incentives and innovation. So we argue constantly about the right blend. Economics isn't a solved science, it's an ongoing debate over 3 questions. What do we make, how do we make it, and who gets it? And the honest answer almost every time is, it depends. But at least now you have peeked behind the curtain. Even with all the theories, invisible hands, and central bank, the whole system ultimately runs on our weird, irrational brains. It's a system that's both efficient and ridiculous at the same time, like a casino disguised as a science. But it's the only game in town. And now, when you buy that toaster, you will know exactly which economic lever you're pulling. Maybe skip the Wi-Fi one. That's probably a bad investment. Keep making choices.